Right now we're going to go into the middle ground with the pumpkins. I'm making 3 types of oranges. The dark orange that I'm making, I'm using a purple with red and yellow. The purple is a cool color, and I'm using that for the shadow mass. So you can see I'm adding a little bit more red into it and violet. So I'm going to go directly to the right side of the biggest pumpkin in the darkest darks, and I'm blocking in the shadow mass. And this is a cooler area because it is in shadow. I'm simplifying the shadow, and I'm using a medium brush, and I'm going with the direction of the pumpkin. So I'm going around it as opposed to any flat brush strokes. Make sure you go right up to the edge of where the pumpkin touches the background, so you can clean up your edges with it. And I'm looking at the reference as I work. I'm using my brush to redefine the edge, and I'm filling it in with that shadow mass. Basically what we're doing is we're simplifying the shadow mass, the medium mass, and the light mass with 3 oranges. So this orange has violet and red. It's not brown though, so make sure you don't go too far with the violet. Keep it still in the like a birch red family. So you can see at the bottom I'm making a space for that little stem that comes up to the pumpkin. I'll go over that as it's not entirely just in shadow. Now this is a very middle of the road orange. You can refer to your color wheel for these colors as well. And I'm going in and I'm adding in the medium mass. As you can see, I'm working light to dark, and I'm simplifying as I go. So I'm dragging in the medium orange into the shadow mass, and if I get too much of the dark color on my brush, I just wipe it off, and then I go back with a reloaded brush. Therefore, I'm not dragging all that color in. It's okay to drag a little bit of color because a pumpkin's not a perfectly solid thing. It has striations of color, but try to keep the value and the temperature clean. And I'm softening that shadow because it's really not as dark as the one on the right. Now I'm going to define that edge again with my medium mass orange, my medium temperature of orange. And I'm going to leave a little bit of this white space, you'll see, for the lighter value, the lightest light, because it is orange and it has yellow in it, which makes it a little bit harder to control. So I'm going to use the white of the canvas to make it even lighter. I'm just kind of lining it up so I can see where that middle division is and blending it. So where the white is where the highlight's going to go. But I'm using my lightest light here, my lightest orange, which has a lot more yellow than the other 2 oranges. Yellow and some white, making it lighter and also warmer. So this is the area of the pumpkin that is closest to the light, therefore it's going to have a warmer appearance in color and in value. I'm using a lot of paint. It's easy for me to move around, and I'll probably get a little bit of that other orange color into it, but you know, it blends really well this way. I'm just dragging some of that light color into the other part of the pumpkin. And this is just our first lay-in, so although I want to cover the canvas as much as possible, I know that there's a lot more details that we will do on the second layer. But it's nice to have a solid lay-in. It's a good springboard to work off of. So I'm just putting a little bit of the lights on the right side, because there is reflective light. If I go too bright, I can always take that background color, a little bit of red over it, and blend it back in. And I'll probably reestablish some of that darker value. But therefore it makes it a little bit more reflective. I'll feather some of my brush strokes a little bit. Now for the top of the pumpkin, I'm making a light green or a medium green. And I'm kind of detailing the top of the ridges of the pumpkin because that part of the pumpkin has a little bit of green in it because it's reflecting from the stem. So I'm not adding a ton of green up there, but just a little bit to have that reflection of the stem. And I'm just smoothing out some of the areas to cover the white spots. The next part that we'll do is the actual stem. So I'm using green, just yellow and blue together. And I'm going to simplify what's from the reference. I'm going to change it a little bit and make it just, a dark green and a warm green. So a little bit of blue on the right side to make it darker, and a little bit of yellow on the left side to make it lighter and warmer. So, very simplified. And then I'll take a little bit of darker color underneath. So I'm just making a few lines in it. Yeah, so I'm just taking a dark blue underneath so that it's not just floating in the pumpkin, but it's kind of sitting in it. So the next part of this, I'm going to do the very back squash. I'm mixing blue and yellow to make green, and then I'm adding black to it. It's further back, it's going to be darker, it's going to be a little bit more neutral, so I added a little bit of red in it. It's in shadow. It's not black, but it's like a foresty green. And then in the front part of it, it gets more warm as it comes towards the light. So I'll start with the dark part. I'm loading my brush. You can see I'm scraping all my paint. This is something I could just go in with one big brush stroke really, and not have to load my brush up too much. And if I work fast, it makes it a lot easier. So I'm going back over those edges, and I'm kind of just doing a little bit of an outline before I go in. You can see that sometimes I twist my brush so that I can get the other side of the brush has more paint on it. So here I'm adding in a little bit of a warmer foresty green, because that's where the light is coming in from the left side. I'm still blending it out a bit. And as I'm working, I'm noticing that this back squash is actually a little bit bigger. And I can tell that because of the shape when I'm looking at my reference. So I'm making it a little bit bigger as I paint. I'm using a little bit of yellow. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to add in those yellow lines that line the squash. And I'll look at the picture so that I'm not just drawing straight lines down, but actually going around the squash. I'm using my smallest brush. I'm not pushing too hard. Just giving like a really delicate kind of broken line. Again, going around it, not flat. So in the front, I'm going to just redraw using a blue black that back part of the squash, and the very front, and the very foreground. It just needed to be a little bit bigger at the back, an easy fix, and it's easy enough to adjust at this stage. I'm going to do this in a blue black. It's not solid. It does get a little bit of greener towards the front. I'm not going to detail every single little dot on it right now. I'm just going to simplify. And I'm using that same blue color at the back of that squash on the right. It just felt like that edge needed to be pushed back just a bit more. And clean up those white spots, which if I have the opportunity to clean up the white spots of the canvas and go over them and really make that good craftsmanship on my painting so it's not distracting my viewer, I'll do that as in the first layer. If I miss something, I'll finish it in the next layer. So I'm just using the oranges that we made for the pumpkin. This is that middle orange. And I cleaned my brush off before I used the orange so I didn't have a dirty brush. This is like a red orange. I put a little bit more red into that middle color. And if I go into the black, which I know I will, I'll wipe my brush off in between. If I get a little bit of black on my brush, that's okay, because I'm being very, very light with my brush strokes, so I'm not picking up a lot. And I'm bringing it to the lighter orange. You can see I'm painting with the form again. I know it's round, my brush strokes are going to reflect the shape. And it does get a little bit greener on the right side, the bottom right side of that squash. So I can just drag my brush with a little bit of orange over the black blue, and it'll get the right color of green for it. And I can, make sure that I get that edge where the reflective light is coming in. And as I get closer to the stem, I'm using more of a yellow. Like a neutralized yellow, so it's probably a little bit of blue black in it. I'm feathering it in, and I'm not doing a ton of blending on this. I want it to be a little bit more impressionistic. Just kind of dotting in some yellows as I look at the reference picture. And that's it.